Hello everyone, Neil Tappin here from Golf Monthly and welcome to the short game area here at Bearwood Lakes Golf Club and part 2 of our series with Eddie Pepperell on how to practice. In this video we're going to be looking at chipping in particular. Now Eddie has quite a sort of traditional chipping method, but he thinks about the short game in a slightly different way to many of the world's top players, and it's that insight you're going to get in this video. Guys, if you're new to the Golf Monthly channel, please do hit the subscribe button to make sure that you don't miss any of our videos. Hit the like button if you like what you're watching. But let's head over, meet Eddie and find out if he can offer some advice on how to improve the short game. Okay, so Eddie, short game. Firstly, I want to talk to you about technique before we talk about how to practice it and how to sort of improve. Because I spoke to you last year at the British Masters and you told me how you're somebody that is quite an old-fashioned style of chipping, the sort of style of chipping that now people seem to be kind of moving away from a little bit. Is that a fair thing to say?
Probably, I suppose. If I started again, yeah, I would probably take on more of the modern, but I'm a poison chalice, I'm afraid. So I just have to deal with what I've got, and because I have a fair bit of handle drag in transition, you have to counteract that so that you're not, doing all sorts of terrible things. So,
can you just quickly explain what the two kind of what people are likely to see?
From this position here, if the handle didn't drag towards the target, and it just say fell, then, which is what you'd see in more modern chippers, it would fall so that it's a nice wide position and then you could collect it with your body and use all the bounce to do all the right things. I tend to have a fair bit of handle drag, so because of that, obviously now, if I just rotated, I'd miss the ball. So there has to be an element of, right, at some point, that club has to fall to the ground. How it gets to the ground is where it's important for me.
Okay.
So to counteract the handle drag, it needs to come in for me.
Okay.
So, yeah. So.
Why, just a quick question, why would you do it the other way? If you were starting again from scratch now, why would you do it the other way? I
think probably because you can have more variety at your disposal more easily. There's a couple of chip shots that I would just struggle with. A tight lie, if I had to hit off a tight lie to a slightly raised green and quite a short shot, that's probably the shot I find most hard, or the hardest. I often would then bump it, if I could. That's why I hate playing kikuyu grass, because I can't bump and run. So I often just walk in. I mean, yeah, that's a particular shot. Having said that, there would be other chip shots where I would benefit. So lower shots,
yes,
tighter lies, links turf would be a great example of where I might prefer it, because I can really bang the club into the ground and never worry about fatting it. So there's all sorts of things that play really, and I'm going to do better on certain surfaces than others. But
can you show us a chip for us and explain to us what are the sort of things that are going through your mind while you're trying to hit these shots? What's a good technical thought for you to have while you're doing this?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously it's going to really depend on the lie, a lot of it. I mean, yes. I've given myself a pretty good lie here, so it's pretty simple. All I've got to do here is just, I keep it really quite standard, and the ball should collect nicely onto the club face really. If, however, the ground, say it had a worse lie, maybe it was sat down a bit like that, and bare lies would be maybe the best opportunity to show what I was just describing there. But say there was a lie like this. Now, this is where it would differ how I would play it to maybe how a more modern player would play it, or someone different would play it, because they would instead think about collecting the bounce this way and then just collecting it off. But that doesn't sit very well with me, and I struggle to do that.
Okay. So
quite often what I tend to do is put the ball back in my stance as opposed to forward in my stance.
Yeah.
I put it more back and just would make sure that there's more of a descending blow.
Okay.
But for me to get the club face back square, that's where I talk about where the handle needs to come into my body earlier.
Right, okay.
Because otherwise it would do this, and I could shank it, I could fat it, I could do all sorts of stuff. So okay. As the ball goes back and the blows say more descending, it has to, the handle has to work in.
Do you feel like you're sort of almost cutting across it then?
No, if anything, you'd feel like you're drawing it.
Okay.
Because it would do this, and then you would collect it this way. So it's actually easier to imagine if you did to split the arms.
Okay.
Because as this comes in, you get the sense for what your right shoulder and your right elbow has to do through the ball. It's more of a draw sensation actually.
Okay.
Counterintuitive that might be. Actually, I find when I start cutting across it, I never cut across it correctly, because I always take the handle with me. So I'm better off trying to practice draws, because it gets me doing more of this.
Is that something that, so a lot of people out there watching this video, myself included,
are probably thinking, what is going on?
No, this is how I was taught to chip. Hands forward, ball back.
Yeah.
So this is a good thought to have. Feel like you're sort of almost drawing it slightly, so that you get that handling towards you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Because there's so many things that can go wrong. You know, certainly thinking about my own chipping, all sorts of shots can come out of the loft.
Yeah. I probably see the most issues with amateur golfers probably do come around the greens. And the reason for that, I think primarily the reason for that is more to do with the backswing as opposed to what happens in the downswing.
Right, go on.
And what I mean by that is I see so many players or amateurs take the club back and the face is too shut. So if you haven't got any loft on the face when you're chipping, it's impossible to chip well. So you never want to see that face be shut when you're chipping. Because if it's shut, how are you going to get that ball in the air? And it's really, really difficult. Even the best players in the world would react. So Tiger Woods, I mean, when people started saying he had the yips around the greens, it's ridiculous. He loses his technique for a short while.
Yeah.
It becomes a mental problem, but it always starts as a technical problem. So you have to fix the technique. And all really great chippers will make sure that the toe is more up to the sky or halfway back as opposed to there. You don't want it shut on the way back because then you have to create loft, and that's when you start doing all sorts of bad things with the handle and all sorts. So you really want to make sure that on the way back you're getting some loft on the face, and I quite like to feel that in my left arm.
Okay.
And you can even just check. That's got. I mean, that would have loads of loft. That's super open, that's super shut, and that's neutral. So in your own mind, you want to make sure that on your way back, it's not shut.
Knowing where it should be. And so, talking about practicing short game, are there any drills that you use, or how do you prepare yourself? Because every golf course you play, as you've already mentioned, different grasses, different firmness underfoot, different challenges really.
I don't practice my short game. I have a putting green in my house, which is why I practice my putting, and I go to a range which is 2 minutes away, which is why I hit, but I never practice my chipping at home. I can't remember the last time I practiced chipping. I do a fair bit of tournaments, especially if I miss a lot of greens. It just correlates so much to my technique, my chipping. I find chipping and pitching is basically the extension of iron play, or vice versa. So when irons tend to be good, chipping and pitching is easy. When irons tend to go off a bit, and it's a similar pattern with me, the chipping and the short game I find tougher, but there's always that relationship going on. So like I think back to some weeks where this year, I mean, Sawgrass does come to mind. I don't recall practicing my short game very much at all.
But you chipped unbelievable.
But my short game was unbelievable, especially on the Sunday. It was everything, and they were all different types of chips actually, and they were all very good. So, I just think technique is so important, and you've got to get that right. And if that's right, you can probably spend much more time eating chocolate in front of the telly than practicing, which is
that's
great.
A decent piece of advice, Eddie. Right, so next question I've got for you then is about putting new wedges into place. So Mizuno have got some new wedges out.
Yep.
These are the T20. Today's the first time you've seen them, right,
yes.
Eddie? First thoughts?
Nice. I mean, when I compare them to here, this one rather, my old one, it's clearly got a bit of a thicker back edge. Which I suspect has something to do with bunker play, which would be nice. But the front edge looks very similar, which is nice. I don't like to have a lot of bounce on my wedges.
Okay. For that reason?
Exactly, because it matches up with my technique. So, I want a fairly sharp leading edge most of the time. And this looks like they've still managed to maintain a good front leading edge. And again, I would probably get this shaved even a degree or two more by the guys at the truck, so that it's got 3 or 4 degrees of bounce. But it looks good. I mean, it doesn't look much different at all, to be honest. The head looks almost identical, which is nice. It's a nice finish to it. And
go on, hit a couple of shots for us and tell us what you think.
It feels a fraction heavier actually in the head. So yeah, it definitely feels heavier. And that could be for a number of reasons.
How particular are you about your equipment, your wedges in particular, but your equipment in general? Are you somebody that's very sort of on it in terms of the detail, or not? Because we see tour players that fall into both categories.
Yeah, no, I'm not that. But I'm quite fussy with my lob wedge. But that's probably the club I'm most fussy with. Irons I tend to just stick in. Really, I changed to these new ones as soon as they came out last year. I suspect I'll put all these wedges in. But lob wedge would be the one where I would want to get a feel for it more, because I use it more. I use it on different variety of shots, and that's where I would be potentially fussy. But doesn't look like there's much reason to be too fussy with this. It does feel heavier, but that could be for a number of reasons. This might just be it's a different swing weight, and I can change that. So looks good.
Cool. Well, there you have it. Some great advice there from Eddie, especially if you are one of those players like me who can get a little bit sort of handle drag with the wedge on the way through the swing. It's not something that Eddie does. He understands how to control it. Hopefully those tips will help you too.